On today's XT250 upgrade video, we're going to be continuing with our Happy Trail sponsored video series. Today, we're going to be mounting SU racks to our top rack and grab handles. The kit comes with everything you need: 2 side racks, 1 rear hoop, hardware, and instructions to mount the rack to your bike. The Happy Trails racks are made for hard luggage but can be used with soft luggage. They feature 2 threaded inserts so you can securely mount your hard luggage to the rack. The kit comes with 2 pages of instructions and a semi-detailed list of what actually comes in the kit. We're going to start by removing the rear bolts that hold in the passenger pegs. We'll only need to remove these back ones and not the front ones. Installing the SU side racks to the top rack and grab handles is relatively easy. Just use all of the supplied hardware. The hardest part is if you're installing it alone. You'll need to set the hardware up first and tighten it down later. Just like with any of the other parts in this series, if you do tighten down parts of this kit, you'll want to make sure that you back off the bolts there, just so you build in some play for pieces of the kit later on. Mounting the SU side racks to the top racks with the hardware is pretty simple. You just want to make sure you use the bolt, washers, spacers, and nylock nuts in the appropriate spots. Installation is pretty much the same on both sides of the rack, but the racks are different, so you want to make sure you put the right one on the right side and the left one on the left side. If you're having difficulty fitting some of the pieces together, you might need to use some persuasion techniques to get them to fit. Typically, if you've built in that play early on by keeping most of the bolts loose, you can just wiggle the pieces together. But in my case, some of my parts were a little bit too tight, so I had to use a hammer to get the fitment correct. Now that we've completed the side racks, we can go ahead and get started on the rear hoop. This rear hoop actually distributes a lot of the weight from one side of the rack to the other side of the rack and builds in a ton of stability. This is a feature that a lot of current rack setups for the XT250 lack. Installation of this part is pretty simple. If you're doing it alone, you want to make sure you set a couple of bolts first before you get really focused on one side. And in terms of installing it, it's pretty simple. They have their own hardware sets. It goes a bolt, small washer, the rack, another washer, backed by a nylock nut. When you're happy with the fitment of everything, you can go ahead and start to tighten everything down. I started from the back of the rack and worked my way forward. Essentially, you just want to make sure everything's straight and lined up before you start tightening anything down too much. But at this point, since you have all of the nuts, bolts, and hardware already put on the bike, you can just go ahead and go around and tighten everything up. Now that you have all of the pieces of the rack together, it's very important that you go through every single nut, bolt, and piece of kit here just to make sure everything's tight and you don't leave anything loose. Although all of the hardware should be backed by a nylock nut, there's still a chance that you lose some hardware if everything's not tightened down properly. And you want to make sure you don't forget about the 2 bolts that hold the rack to the passenger pegs, because it's easily overlooked. And that pretty much rounds out this part in the Happy Trails rack setup. The parts fit together beautifully, and in the next part we're going to go ahead and go over how to relocate your rear turn signals to work with this kit. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys stay tuned for the next video in the Happy Trails sponsored series.